Hello and welcome to Love Anything Art. Today, something a little different. I'm going to show you how I resin my pieces. Everybody does it differently, but this is how I like to do it. I have two resin bottles, one that actually has the little drip tap on the top, and then one that's going to be open. I use the open one for dipping, and I use a paintbrush that's specifically used for resining. And then I'll kind of show you when I use which one. Of course, you'll need a paintbrush. You can use a toothpick if you like. I've seen some polymer clay artists on YouTube using that sort of a thing, but I prefer the paintbrush. I'm going to show you how I resin a couple of different pieces here. Now, I have already resined this. My strategy is I do the sides of my piece first. Some of them don't have sides, like this one, it's just a full piece. It goes all the way from the lip of the bottom, all the way in domes over the top. It's kind of the same scenario as just doing the top, and I'll kind of show you as I go. So if it had a side, I would do the side all the way around to this heart first. But the entire top is connected, so. This one, there is a side. And of course, there's the middle. So you'll see there the lip. I resin the sides of my pieces first. That's always what I do. Any surface that's flat on its side when you lay it down. So that middle part will be part of the sides. And again, this is another domed piece. You do have to work kind of fast on these because it will dribble over the side. Sides first, like I said, and then I will do the bottoms, and then I will do the top. And that's just the order I like to do it in. You could do it in any order you want. I would recommend doing the sides first, and that is because you kind of want to get those all the way up to the edge or the rim of the top and the bottom, and you want those well resined before you do the top and the bottom. That way you can make sure all you have left is just to resin the top and the bottoms. And I'll be showing you a little side pieces here on the small one. Again, I will do all of the sides, and then the back, and then the front. I think it's important to kind of establish a pattern when you do things with clay and resining. So I'll go ahead and get started here. And I'll show you these pieces since the other ones are already resined. First, we start with the sides. You can put or glue the eye hook in first. I don't like doing it like that, but you can use that as a leverage for holding. You can use a tool and hold it, or you can use your fingers and hold it so that you can resin the sides if you're afraid of getting or don't want to get resin on your fingers. You can also wear gloves. I just find that really difficult for me because my hands tend to shake a little bit. So who knows what's going to happen. I have better control with my fingers and not gloves, and the resin doesn't bother me. For these sides, it's easier for me to dip my paintbrush into the bottle that's open as opposed to using the one where it pours, because you kind of have to hold it in place and wait for it to come out, and you might get out too much at a time. And this way I can control exactly how much I have on my paintbrush. I don't want a whole bunch. You want enough to where you're actually spreading the resin over the piece. You don't want to be basically dry brushing a thin layer on. You do need a little bit of a thicker layer. I find that if you have a thin layer and you're stretching it across the clay, you tend to get bubbles and an uneven surface, and you don't get that glassy, glossy look to it. When I get to the top where my eye hook is, I'm just going to be very delicate with it and put just enough around it. The reason why I don't like to usually glue in my eye hooks before is because once you get up there to the top and you're putting on your resin, it tends to kind of, move and stick to the eye hook, and I feel like it disturbs the overall flow, and it kind of makes like this little tiny bump where it hits the eye hook. That's just me personally. Sometimes I have to do it because of the type of piece it is and I have nowhere else to hold and I'm going to get resin everywhere. I will put in the eye hook first and use it as leverage to hold, but generally speaking, I just don't do that until after everything's already resined. You want to make sure you go back and there is no bubbles or anything like that. I usually don't have a problem with that, but every once in a while, you know, you just kind of get a little air bubble in there, a little air pocket. You would just smooth it out if you did get one with your paintbrush. And for some reason on the black clay and the non-Premo clay, you get this pullback from the resin around the edges of the piece. I have seen and heard that you can get some products where it doesn't do that pulling. I have never tried them, so I'm not even going to give you any kind of opinion on that. I'm sure they work. I've never tried them, so I don't personally know if they work to the extent that would be beneficial. So I just stick with the resin, and all I do is a second coat on the sides. I don't have to do them when I'm doing pieces like translucent clay because I use Premo, but on these colored pieces of clay and any non-Premo clay, I tend to get a little bit of a peel back. Once I put that second layer on though, I don't know what it is, it tends to go all the way to the edge and stay there. You do want to work kind of quickly when you're doing it. Don't rush. Don't be like, oh, I have to get this in the cure box immediately. Don't try to do that. But you do want to work rather quickly when you got resin and it's dripping. And, you know, with gravity, if you have resin on the bottom of a piece, it's going to naturally start to drip down. So you do want to work at a nice steady pace. Just doing resining. Don't do anything else. That's just what I found. And again, you know, people do different things. I've seen a whole bunch of different ways where people resin. There's even the clay boutique lady. She doesn't resin the sides of her pieces. I personally like the sides of my pieces resin, so you can leave that step out if you want to and just do the tops and the bottoms. I think the top's the most important because you're going to want that domed look. But I did do a second coat, cured it, and you'll see that it looks much better. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing to the inside. It's a little bit more tricky doing it on the inside. I would say start with less resin. I don't know, because of how I'm turning the piece and all that, if you have a piece that needs to be resined on the inside. And I do recommend doing that before you do the tops or the bottoms because you're going to inevitably get some leakage on the top or the bottom. And you want to be able to cover that up with a nice, beautiful, polished, finished resin coat on the top. That's kind of also the reason why I do the sides first, because you get overlap onto the top and then it's going to mess up your beautiful, glossy, pretty little top. I am going to do a second coat on the inside because it did the little pull away or peel back from the edges. So I got the sides all done and the inner part all done, and you'll see the back is a big old mess. And you can kind of see where the sides leaked over onto the back, but that is no problem because once you put your resin on top, it's unnoticeable. When I'm working with the tube, I do like to let the resin slowly come down. Don't squirt it because there's a big air bubble at the top because all the resin's at the bottom and it's slowly working its way to the top so you can squeeze it out. You'll get an air bubble when you do that. You can work out the air bubble, of course, but if you want to have a less chance of having any of those little air bubble pockets in there, just let the resin slowly come to the top, squeeze it out, and then I start resining my piece. I do like to just do a thin-ish kind of layer all around the inner part, and then I start working that resin out towards the sides and the middle. You want to get the middle ring of the piece completely resined in and then start pulling it out towards the sides and the outer rim. As you'll see here, I'm only doing the middle, pulling it out, and then kind of getting it closer to the edges. I will go back once I get the entire thing resined. I'll start to really concentrate on the sides, kind of dabbing it along and kind of smearing the resin as I'm showing you kind of here. And then I will work on the inner part too, making sure that lip is nice and done. Generally, I don't have to re-resin the top or the bottom. It does happen if like I accidentally put my finger in it when I'm putting it in the cure box. Anything can happen, or I don't know, like I put my finger in it after it dries and it wasn't quite dry. It has that tacky feeling. That's another thing. You kind of don't want to mess with the resined piece for probably about 20-30 minutes. I have found that if you take the piece and you run it under water, it does kind of help that process and you can touch it a lot faster. It needs to cool, and the whole thing is getting warmed up, right? Because it's in the little UV resin box. And again, before you put it under the cure light, you do want to make sure there are no air bubbles. So I kind of tilt mine to the side a little bit, back and forth, look around, because sometimes, even though you think you spread it all the way around, there's this one little dot that didn't get any resin on it. And you're like, dang it. And then, you know, if you've already resined and cured and then you got to re-resin, it's just kind of a pain in the buttocks. So I just like to give it a nice cursory kind of a glance, tilting it side to side, back and forth, moving it around, making sure at all angles the resin is on there. And then the last step, of course, I'm showing you now, is doing the top. I do put more resin on the top than any other part, and that's because I kind of want it to be a nice thick layer on the top. You can make it the same layer or thickness of the layer on the top and the bottom and the sides if you want to. That's totally up to you. If you do want to make the top a little bit more thick, what I would do is put just the same amount you would do on the backside. Get it all around the edges, get it all nice and perfect, I guess you could say. And then I would take my squeeze bottle and then lightly just drop every once in a while, doop, 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 all around the center, and then just let it sit there, and it'll start to expand and like flow out towards the sides a little bit, just naturally, because it's a liquid, it's gonna start moving, right? That way you can just start building it up a little at a time. Don't put a whole bunch on there and then try to move it all around, because it's gonna be a big old mess. Just get your basic layer on there and then just start adding a drop at a time. And then you can cure it. Of course, make sure you don't have any air bubbles. And if you do have an air bubble, you can use a toothpick and just kind of poke at it. I just use my paintbrush and kind of dab at it a little bit and move it around. It generally gets it out. And by the way, this is the resin brand that I use. I've been using this for, well, since 2021, I believe. I was using another one that was similar before that, and it worked fine. There's actually no name brand on there, so I couldn't tell you what it was, but I will leave a link below if you are interested in that particular resin. And then these are all my pieces. Just kind of wanted to show you how pretty and glossy and beautiful they look. Honestly, I would say if you are struggling with resining, the best thing to do is to practice. That's just coming from somebody who's sucked at it. When I first started, and I felt the same way. I was like, all these people, and it's just beautiful and flawless, and I don't know, they do something. They just, use some kind of program, and they take out all the bubbles just on screen, but they look like caca in person. But no, honestly, it really just takes time and practice and effort. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!